Thank you for joining us for a series of one-on-one discussions with each of the three candidates who are running for the open seat on the Hingham Select Board. My name is Greg Corbett, and I'm hosting these conversations on behalf of the supporters of the Hingham Public Schools, which is a nonpartisan affiliate group comprised of Hingham residents who support the Hingham Public Schools. The group currently maintains a Facebook page with over 1,100 members who are active in school and town issues at all levels. If you're interested in learning more about the group, you can find information on Facebook at Supporters of the Hingham Public Schools. We appreciate that the candidates have already engaged in several panels and forums with a more formal structure with opening statements. The intent here is to have a conversation focused on issues related to the schools. The group has solicited and pre-vetted a number of questions from within its membership, with each candidate being asked the same set of core questions. We've asked the candidates to keep their responses to each question to under 2 minutes. And with that, we will begin our conversation with Select Board candidate Michelle Larned. Ms. Larned, welcome.
Hi.
And thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Excellent. So we will we'll start it off. I have a series of questions, and on some of the questions, I will put up a slide to share. So let me start with question number 1, and I'm going to share the slide as well so our viewers can see it more easily as well. What do fully funded Hingham schools look like to you?
All right. Well, if you watch the Hingham Unity Council forum that was last night and is now recorded and available, I kind of talked about this, but for me, what it looks like is that the school committee and the school board don't have to slash off a bunch of things that are needs for our students and for our teachers. And so if you've watched any of the budget processes, either this year or in previous years, which I've done over the course of preparing for this run for select board, is that there seems to be a contentious relationship between the select board and the school committee where they think that they're asking for too much. And what you can do with the money what you want, but there's only so much money. And so when the school committee and the school board have to slash off things like a counselor or a teacher, an art teacher, different programming, that is eliminating opportunities for our students. So a fully funded school to me looks like all of the needs and I don't want to call them wants because I think they're kind of all needs, but those things are all met where we can fully give to our students so that they can be the best that they can be. And that they don't have to go outside of school, that the parents don't have to pay additional costs of supporting their education because they're getting what they need in school. And some parents will choose to still do that, and that's great, but they shouldn't have to do it. And that's the point, that's the thing for me, is that they're getting everything that they need, and we're not having to take off essential things from the school budget in order to have an agreeable budget from the select board.
Okay, thank you. So moving along to the next question, and for the next question, I'm going to show you a couple of slides before I ask the question as a preview to the question. So let me share my screen again here. What you're seeing here are 2 slides that were created by the school department earlier this year in presentations to the select board and the advisory committee, showing that Hingham has one of the worst student-teacher ratios of all of its peer towns. I'm going to go to the next slide. And what you're seeing here are 2 slides from the same presentations showing that Hingham has the lowest or among the lowest per pupil expenditures of all its peer towns. Hingham Public Schools rank at or near the bottom of its peer towns as measured by several objective metrics, including student-teacher ratio and per pupil expenditure. Do you have a view as to whether the Hingham schools have been structurally underfunded for many years, and how would you propose addressing this?
It seems to be that the answer is yes, right? So crises and things like COVID expose our weaknesses, and where you can get by and those sort of things can stay hidden. When we have something like COVID present itself, it exposes the weaknesses that we have. And one of those has been the underfunding of our schools. And that's why there's been so much conversation this year around the budget, because I think that we were able to sort of just fly right under the radar. Some of the things that have been said, well, per pupil spending isn't right because it's not adjusted for the fact that we pay for benefits for the teachers out of one big pool. That was a choice that we made to save money, actually. So I think that, yeah, the answer is yes, that they have been. And this is the same thing that happens whenever you do not maintain something for a period of time, you end up having a huge expenditure, right? Just like your house. If you don't give it maintenance all the time, at some point in time, something is going to break. And that is where we are at now. And unfortunately, it is going to cost us to fix it. But we don't have a choice. The risk is at first our students, but on a bigger platform, it is a risk to our town. It's a risk to people moving here. It's a risk to our property values. So for those people who do not have students in the public schools, they are also impacted by how well our schools are funded and how well we can provide services to our students.
Thank you. I'm going to move along to the next question. And again, I'm going to show you a couple of slides as we prepare for that question. Give me one second. Okay, you again see slides. On the left, it's 2020 tax data for Hingham and its 20 peer communities ranked from highest to the lowest tax rate. And on the right side, a slide presented by one of the Hingham Advisory Committee members at a meeting earlier this spring showing tax burden as a percentage of average town income. Hingham's residential tax rate is among the lowest of our peer towns as measured by several different metrics, including tax rate by assessed value and average tax bill per average income. How does this affect your view about whether the town needs or should support an override?
Well, I mean, I think I was clear that I supported an override early on, and that is because we have to pay for the services in the town, and one of the services that is necessary, it's mandatory for us to provide, is an education to our students. It is half of the budget for every town, so we can't pretend that it's only half of the budget for our town and for other towns. It just, that is what it looks like. I have had a handful of conversations with people who have told me that an increase in tax might impact their ability to stay here in Hingham. But I would say, based on other conversations that I've had, that we're actually doing, from my perspective, we're doing okay. And earlier on, and I should have brought my notes for that, but I did the math, and the average cost increase was something very minimal if we did an override. Now, of course, yes, that's a tax increase for, forever tax increase, but that means that we have made a decision to fund the schools. That's ultimately what it means. Now, are the override dollars, that's not all just for the schools. Obviously, they're going to split it up amongst all of the budgetary needs because the goal is to have a balanced budget at the end. But ultimately, you don't just get to live in a nice town with a nice home that continues to increase in value and not be able to pay for the services that you get here. And so we have to pay for it. It doesn't, I think that there are options for people who would be struggling if the taxes were to increase. But that being said, just like the chart showed, we're paying some of the lowest. So it seems a little unbalanced to want to come to a town that gets to sit among some of those benchmark communities, but doesn't have to pay for services and has underfunded schools.
As a follow-up to that, Ms. Larned, how do you view the role of the select board in advocating for an override, and if among some of the population the idea of an override is not popular?
Well, so I think part of this is about the tone, and it's about the way that we address things. And so from my perspective, and I'm going to touch on something that I know is a touchy subject, but in every single select board meeting that I attended, they said AAA bond rating no less than 5 times, no less. And so when you say things enough, we learn this in language, right? When you say things enough, people start to believe it. Unfortunately, it's not really true. A AAA plus bond rating has a minimal impact on our interest rates. And if just like when you go to buy a car, sometimes we'll pay a little bit higher to get more of what we want. And what we want right now is for the services of our town to be funded, which include the schools. So I think it starts with tone. I think that people are smart and they know how to make decisions for themselves, and we need to present the information in a way that people are able to make the decision. So if we were to use some of our fund balance, this is what would happen. It may drop. We may end up with a AA plus bond rating, and here would be the impact on our interest rates, and let people make decisions. At one point in time this year, they said, people move here for AAA bond rating. And I laughed out loud because I have never one time heard a person say that they moved here for bond rating. I can tell you that I moved here for the schools. So I think it's about the tone, it's about the approach, it's about opening up conversation and making sure that people understand both sides of the coin.
Thank you. And actually, some of your response will play into my next question. And I'm going to share my screen again here. And you see a slide. This year, for setting the fiscal year 22 budget and to fully fund the budget as requested by the school department, the town relied on $2.4 million from unassigned fund balance, which is in essence the town's rainy day fund. At the end of fiscal year 20, the town had over $30 million in its rainy day fund, which was over 25% of the town's annual expenditures. Some have suggested that it is prudent to keep such a high level of fund balance, including as it helps to maintain the town's AAA bond rating. Going to the next slide. However, there are only a small number of towns A that actually have a AAA bond rating by Moody's, and most of them actually keep an unassigned fund balance that is closer to 10% of total annual expenditures, as you see here in this slide. So moving to the next slide. So question to you, and I know you've already touched upon this, does the town's fund balance policy need changing, and how would you address that on the Board of Select?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. If you'd seen me watching a lot of the select board meetings, I kind of watch them like I watch like women's basketball or women's soccer, where I'm really I'm responding to what's happening on the screen, and I think that's one of the things that has been really interesting to me, is that, like I said, I don't think we're presenting the whole picture. One of the things that was mentioned is, oh, well, years ago when we had to do an override, we came very close to losing our AAA bond rating, but we didn't. And so, I frankly, I don't think that it makes a difference. Honestly, the impact is minimal. And I think I said this, and I wish I could quote myself better, but we've got all of this money in the bank, but our house is falling down. And it just doesn't make any sense to me to maintain money. If we're saving something that is a rainy day fund, the fact that this year there was even such a battle, if this isn't a rainy day, what is a rainy day? What rainy day are we looking for? And I get concerned that that rainy day is being saved for other things that are not for the schools. And that is my concern. And if I was a select board member, the schools have to be a priority. When something takes 50% of your budget, it should be your priority.
Okay, thank you. And again, your answer plays into my next question here. I'm going to share my screen again. There are several capital projects currently in the pipeline, partially because we've not invested in infrastructure on a continuous basis in the past. Now there are multiple projects requiring attention, including the Foster School, other schools that need improvements, the proposed new public safety building, the senior center, etc. Do you agree with the current order and priority in which we are currently pursuing and seeking to fund these capital projects?
I mean, ultimately the answer is no, I do not. I'm disappointed in the way that we have gone about and the excitement for the public safety building. That doesn't take away for the need for the public safety building, but this year we had to send students to another school in another town in order to get at their education because we couldn't serve them in our own town. Hingham had to send students to Weymouth. If that sentence to you does not bring up concern, then I don't know how to. I mean, people are yelling saying this is a problem and we need to listen. I think that all of these things need to be done, certainly. I'm disappointed in the timing of a public safety building. And I think particularly because I think that we had a feasibility study done, a handful of years ago in the fire department, did nothing about it. Then it was like, oh, well, now we can't really, rearrange on that site. I want the firefighters to have a safe place to operate out of. They need to do that so that they can respond to emergencies to my house. Certainly the police station needs to be able to operate safely. Some of the excuses for the reason why the police station needed to be relocated, I thought were sort of interesting, like everybody goes in and out of the front door, like the humans go in and out of the front door. Regardless if you've been arrested for a crime, you still get to go in and out of the front door. You shouldn't be shooed out the back. I think I've heard language around that the seniors want to stay at the senior center, but I've only heard that from people serving on the select board, and I have not heard that from seniors that I've asked. So I think I'm concerned about those things while places like Foster School, we are waiting for funds. The question that I don't have the answer to, and I wish that I did, is if we had gone ahead and started work on Foster School without waiting for these funds to come in, would that have impacted the funds to come in? I don't know the answer to that, and I probably should know that answer, but I don't think that you can just keep pushing things off while moving forward with other things that to me are not as big of a priority as our students having a safe place to go to school.
Okay, thank you. I'll move to the next question.
My chickens also were really passionate about that question. I don't know if you could hear them in the background.
The town is just undertaking a strategic study that will make recommendations for how the schools can improve. Many of these recommendations will take funding to implement beyond the fiscal year 22 budget that was just recently approved. What do you think the town should do with these recommendations?
I'm sorry, can you put the slide back up again?
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Yes, okay, sorry. I missed a sentence there and I was like, I think I don't know the question. Yes, so, I mean, the question is, I think that if there are recommendations how the school should improve, we should figure out how to fund it. When at my old unit, so I used to have a sign that said, what did it say? Don't tell me, tell me how we can do it. Don't tell me no, or that saying. So it was basically lots of people can say, no, we can't do that. And that's their first response. And then they sort of figure it out. I think that we need to say, how can we do this? What is our answer to fund these projects? And that needs to be the way that we lead. There are lots of times that we go forward with that and then we aren't able to do things, and that's okay. But if we lead with we can't, then we can't. When I go to the gym, if I tell myself that I can't pick up a weight, I'm right. And so if we're telling ourselves and we're telling our town that we cannot do something, then we're right. And so we need to approach it from the other direction and say, how can we do this? Schools are a priority. We need to make sure that our schools are the best that they can possibly be. And I said this in a video that I posted the other day. If we don't start making some moves now, all these benchmark towns, they're going to pass us by. And then who's going to move here? And now what does our tax revenue look like? That is going to be a problem.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question. The Hingham schools are currently performing an equity and inclusion audit geared at identifying potential opportunity gaps that might exist and impact students' ability to reach their full potential. How can Hingham be more welcoming for special education students, and what can we do about the stigma against special education?
Well, so I think the first thing is everything is about language, right? And so special education is just education. It's the education that's needed for a population of students. And I think that when we separate special education from the overall needs of our students, we're othering people. And that's one of the things that I fight against as a social worker day to day, is that we all have unique needs, and we're all special. Now, I recognize that having to label something grants access to be able to get additional funding and that sort of thing. But we cannot, once again, we have students that are having to go, we're paying for students to go to other schools because we cannot serve them. And so I think that that is one of the things that shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't have people saying, I cannot send my students to this school because they do not get the services they need. We cannot have students lacking behind because we can't meet the needs of their IEPs. I even heard recently that a student's IEP couldn't be served in an AP class. That's ridiculous. An IEP just talks about the specialized way that a student is going to learn. It doesn't mean that they don't have the capacity to learn, or they don't deserve the opportunities that an AP student might get. And so I think that what we need to be doing, both amongst the adults and the children at the school, is to talk about special education as just education, and not make it as if it's this burden on us to provide. It is essential for us to provide.
Okay, thank you. And trying to keep to my idea of keeping this under 20 minutes, we are arriving at our last question here, what I think is our last question. Sharing the slide. What do you think about our current town meeting format and logistics? Do you have thoughts about how we can make it easier for parents to participate in town meeting?
Yeah, so I think that the history of town meeting is very cool, right? But for instance, I have a friend who is a doctor. She didn't get to come to town meeting to use her voice because she was being a doctor, probably for children in this town. And to me, that is unacceptable. People don't have the capacity to, rearrange their schedules to be able to participate. And from my understanding, there wasn't, childcare available at town meeting. And so I remember thinking at one point in time when people were saying, I can't come, I don't have, I was like, okay, I'll babysit all the kids. They can all come here, play with the chickens, and then everybody else can go to town meeting. One individual shouldn't have to step up to do that sort of thing. And so I think that accessibility to people, as a general rule in all of our town politics, can use some improvement. I would love to see, I think one of the thoughts that I have is, the people would miss out on some of the discussion, but maybe an early voting so that you can still have your voice heard, because we do get the warrant. Now, unfortunately, we don't get the warrant significantly in advance, but then especially on votes that are close, that at least we know that their voices are heard. I'm in the military, as people know, and for the special town meeting around the public safety building, I didn't get to go because I had military, and in that particular circumstance, I wasn't able to reschedule. Now, I can make things flexible, but people have other needs, and I think opening up opportunities for people to have their voice heard is really important. And I think that one of the things that we do as a town is we get stuck on history and how hard people have worked in history. But just because we make changes doesn't take away from how hard people have worked in our history to create some of these things. It still is history, and it still is really interesting. But we need to step forward, we need to move forward, and we need to do things that increase opportunities for people to participate in our town government. which includes posting all of the meetings. I say this all the time, so I want to get it in. Posting all of the meetings of the committees and the select board onto the Harbor Media page, or at a minimum posting the meeting minute notes in a reasonable time period that don't have to be, and what I've been told, well, you can request them, but individuals shouldn't have to request them. They should be posted and they should be available in a reasonable period of time.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
That concludes the questions I had. Thanks for your time. Thanks for speaking with me today. And thank you for your time and your commitment in running for elected office.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I like these conversational ones. I'm better than, it's better for me than reading a lot of the scripts. So.